Hello, my loves. I am sure that many of us will be aware that Guillermo del Toro's new adaptation of Frankenstein dropped on Netflix this week. Honestly, I had absolutely no intention of watching it because I'm not really a film person. I don't really watch films that much anymore. However, I'd been seeing a lot of discussion online, specifically from people who care about the book, and sort of their opinions were from the place of it being a good adaptation rather than just another Frankenstein film. And of those opinions, I've seen, I suppose, quite conflicting opinions, with some people saying it was like really good and really getting into it, and other people really disliking it. And what I kind of saw from these reviews, or the kind of theme that I got, was that the people who were really enjoying it weren't necessarily looking at it as an adaptation, they were just more looking at it as a film, and the people that seemed to have more criticism or dislike of it were more sort of in the book sphere. And I thought, seeing as I'm in the book sphere and I did quite enjoy Frankenstein, maybe I'll watch it. There was actually one post in particular that made me decide to watch it. I don't think I'm going to be able to find the post because I saw it, did not interact with it in any way, and then just kind of scrolled on and went on with my day. But it was a post on Threads, and it was someone basically saying that they had a lot of problems with how Victor's backstory had been changed, and also how the film made the monster or the creation very sympathetic, which they felt was against what the story or the book was trying to do. If they were right in what they were saying, I kind of half agreed with what they were saying and half didn't agree. So I thought, let's just watch it and form my own opinions. I just want to talk about it. I just want to give my thoughts about it and sort of which side of the fence I'm sitting on. And I'd also really like to hear your thoughts if you have seen it, specifically if you thought it was a good adaptation or not. I think that's specifically the lens I went into it with, was sort of looking at, is this a good visual making of this book? But you'll see that my thoughts have kind of strayed a little bit further from that. We'll get into it. To sum up very broadly how I feel about this, do I feel like it was a good film? Yes. Do I feel like it was a good adaptation? And let me tell you why. This video is of course going to include some spoilers of the film, but that being said, it is very much a proper adaptation retelling of the original novel, so I feel like I don't really know if I need to give a spoiler warning because, you know, the book's been out for over 100 years. Just beware, I will be talking about what happens in the film. So firstly, I do think it's important to talk about what constitutes a good adaptation, and I think this is going to be very different for everyone. For me personally, a good adaptation will take creative liberties in changing things, but it will also retain the overall or core sort of theme, message, and plot of the original work, in my opinion. I know everyone's going to be very different on that, and I am the kind of person that if I'm watching something that I've read before, I will sit there and be like, that didn't happen in the book, that didn't happen in the book, oh, they've done that differently. And I don't think that necessarily means it's bad, because there are going to be small things that have to be changed. They just don't work in film the same way they do in a book. I do appreciate that a lot of people can be like that and find it quite annoying when things are changed seemingly for no reason. There is a little part of me that's like, everything should be exactly the same. I'm trying to be less rigid in that, which is where, like, as long as the core things are there, the key things, I think that's the most important thing to me. Just a little note for context, by the way, throughout this video I will be referring to Victor's monster or creation as Jerry. This basically comes from when I read Frankenstein. I personally didn't like that he never bothered giving his creation a name, so I just decided to name him Jerry. And I think I did this in a video. Yeah, I made a video explaining the entire plot of Frankenstein a long time ago now. If you haven't read it and you want to know the whole plot, maybe go and watch that, but I can't really vouch for how good that video was because it was quite a long time ago, and past Nikki is not the same as current Nikki. Maybe I should have rewatched that video, because another caveat is I have not read Frankenstein in quite a long time. I did look back at some parts of it, just like skimmed some parts, because I knew they were different, but I couldn't quite remember how. So I sort of skimmed for the purpose of this video, but I have not actually read the full book in quite a long time. I think I remember decently enough what happened, but there are of course going to be things I forget. So if I do get anything wrong when sort of comparing the film to the book, please let me know. My memory is notoriously bad. So to sum up my thoughts, I'm going to split this very much as the film did, and I suppose you could technically say how the book does, into my thoughts on Victor's tale and then my thoughts on Jerry's tale. So we'll start with Victor. I will also start by saying that I despise Victor Frankenstein. He's one of my least favourite characters in anything ever. I hate him. The particular thing that made me want to watch this was the comment on they've changed his backstory to try and make him seem more sympathetic. And I was like, no, he's an asshole and I don't want to sympathise with him. A further point against them for this is the fact that they cast Oscar Isaac to play Frankenstein. Not because I dislike Oscar Isaac, I really like Oscar Isaac, and I did not like watching Frankenstein and being like, Victor looks really attractive because I hate him. I don't want to be attracted to Victor Frankenstein. Luckily, he was still hateful, but we'll get to that in a minute. I made a few changes with Victor, but I think the most predominant thing that I noticed and I saw, I think it was that original post that I was talking about saying, was that they very much changed his childhood. In this film, when he's telling his story, is saying that his father was not around a lot, and then when he was around, he was very abusive. There's a scene of him trying to teach him something, and Victor forgets the answer for it, and he just hits him with a stick repeatedly. He was not a nice man. They also then add in that, you know, he was very close, Victor was very close with his mother. They had a really good relationship. His dad seemed to sort of almost like resent them for that. And then she went into labor to have his younger brother, and she died. In the film, Victor's dad is a doctor and she still died. He blames his father for her dying, and he decides that is his like motivation for wanting to overcome death, I suppose, and be able to sort of have that power over life and death, is because his dad's a piece of shit and he let his mum die, in his opinion. I mean, I don't really like that. I really don't like that decision, honestly. And the reason I don't like that decision is because I think it does change Victor's character quite a lot. In the book, none of that happens. I actually wrote a quote down for when I was like looking back over to display to you what Victor's childhood was actually like, and that is, no human being could have passed a happier childhood than myself. He had a great childhood. He was quite privileged. They travelled around a lot. I don't remember what his dad did for work in the book, but he was definitely not a doctor. His mum gave birth to his brother. She did not die in childbirth, and he did not blame his father for it. His father was sort of described as quite nurturing, encouraged his knowledge and enthusiasm for different things. Victor's motivation for wanting to almost like become God and be able to bring things to life, essentially, was just because he came across a book on natural science when he was 13, and then he became obsessed with it, and his dad was like, oh, that's nonsense, like, don't read that. And Victor was like, fuck you, I'm gonna read it anyway. I think he had a brief period where he didn't care about it anymore, but then he went on to just become obsessed with it and was studying natural science, was studying chemistry, and then began his experiments for bringing something back to life. And I think the film giving him he had a tragic backstory. His mum died and he blamed his father for it, and he was just the sad little boy who wanted to bring his mum back. I think just completely ruins the fact that actually no, he was just kind of insane and very obsessive about knowledge, and he just wanted to be able to do this. He was very selfish, very greedy, and very arrogant, and that is what drove him. It wasn't the fact that there was some trauma or tragedy here. He was just awful and had a great childhood. Money was, you know, never a concern, so he just thought, I can do whatever I want, and he did. That is one of the things that made him so hateful in the book. Just he had no reason to do any of the things he did and act the way he did, and then also he never took any accountability for any of the things he did. Whereas in the film, although he, especially later in the film, he is still a horrible person, you do end up hating him. Never once did I particularly feel sorry for him, but that's because I knew what, you know, who he really is and what he was going to become. It does almost try to frame it in a more sympathetic lens than I think he deserves, and then I think the spirit of the book was written. And as far as I'm aware, his character was very much about the ambitions of men and sort of going too far and not, you know, stopping or taking accountability for that at any point, or really taking no as an answer, just them having that really unhealthy, arrogant ambition. That's not how it's portrayed in the film, and I don't like us trying to sympathise him. He's an asshole. To add further to that as well, like with this storyline, the way they decided to go with it was that when Victor had been successful in creating his monster, in creating Jerry, he was really nice to him at first. He was so excited. He was like speaking to him, laughing with him, trying to to teach him things. And then he just slowly got more and more frustrated with Jerry, as Jerry wasn't learning things as quickly as he was expecting to. And then he basically just turned into his abusive father and was harming him because he, you know, I suppose that's how he'd been taught things. So that's just what he was doing to Jerry. Despite the fact that he was like, I'm going to be better than my father and I'm never gonna be like him, he actually just ended up becoming his father, which I suppose maybe is part of the plot of this film, but also it annoyed me. In the book, what actually happens is he makes Jerry, and then as soon as Jerry's like awake, he's like, oh no, actually, I changed my mind, and he just runs out of the room, doesn't say anything, he just bricks it and runs and just abandons his child, essentially. So there's no even like initial kindness towards him, he just immediately abandons it. Again, I feel like by the film being like, oh, he was nice to him at first and he tried and he encouraged him, it's still, although yes, he goes on to be awful, I feel like it's still just trying to paint this poor man turning into his dad when he didn't want to, and it's kind of like a tragic story, which it shouldn't be. It should be this fucking idiot of a man did this and is now confused by the consequences of his own actions. Like, that's the story. Cautionary tale, not a, oh, poor Victor, he had a hard childhood and now he's made a mistake. These next couple of things that were like different in the film. I think they're different about Victor's character. They're not really as important. They're more like plot details, but I think they do almost help to shape his character a little bit, which is that in the film, he was very much like, he was giving seminars. He was trying to convince people of his ideas of how he could bring things back to life and how he could create life, I suppose. So he was doing demonstrations in front of like all these scientists and stuff, and people clearly weren't very happy about it. But he was very passionate about it and was not trying to hide it in any way. Again, is very different to in the book, where he was incredibly secretive about the experiments he was doing. He didn't want anyone to know. So in the film, he basically ends up getting like a wealthy benefactor who pays for all of his experiments, and part of that is that man whose name I've forgotten arranges for him to have the bodies of hanged criminals so that he can use them as part of his experiment and creating Jerry, right? In the book, I'm pretty sure, this could be me misremembering things, so correct me if I'm wrong, I think he just stole bodies and body parts from different places, I think. There definitely wasn't any wealthy benefactor. Yeah, he was a university student, so I don't think he would have had easy access to cadavers. I'm pretty sure he just stole them. I think he was just like a grave robber or a morgue robber. I don't have a huge problem with that. I think it makes sense for storytelling, and it's probably more visually compelling than just like a guy being crazy in his room and then stealing from graves, you know? The problem I have with it is that him having this person encouraging him and, you know, having other people help him, it again adds to that thing of it's almost like he has excuses. Other people were encouraging him, other people were supporting him in these endeavors. It wasn't his fault entirely that all of this stuff happened. He is somewhat a little bit absolved of that, and it doesn't make it okay, but it almost makes it somewhat more okay. But I also think it removes some of just how unhinged he was, because again, he's got quite rational people helping him. No one's really stopping him from doing this. His own brother is helping him in the film. In the book, it's like he knows he shouldn't be doing it and he doesn't want to do it, so he's keeping it all very secret to the extent of almost coming like a bit delusionally paranoid. He's just stealing bodies and being a weird little scientist and passing out from fevers of stress. Like, I think the film did an okay job, but I don't think the film fully captured quite how insane Victor Frankenstein is because of those little changes that don't seem like the biggest deal. There was no like descent into madness. It was just like, mum's dead, I'm gonna learn how to create life. You know, it was very quick. It wasn't like from the age of 13 to however old I was researching this and obsessing over it and stealing bodies and doing loads of failed experiments, and then one day I randomly found out how to do it, but I'm not gonna tell you how. It just felt a bit too easy, a bit too quick. Yes, he clearly wasn't all there, but he also wasn't insane enough for my taste. I think his character was a little bit changed by then those plot changes, which again just made him, I still didn't like him, but I think it did give him a more like sympathetic lens. Something else that also changed that I suppose is kind of in between both stories is the character of Elizabeth. In the film, Elizabeth is Frankenstein's brother's fiance and Frankenstein fancies her. In the book, she is Frankenstein's adopted sister. I do know that the way he used to talk about her and think about her was a bit weird, but I can't, this is one of the things I can't remember. Did Victor and Elizabeth get together in the book? I don't remember, but he definitely had more than just sisterly feelings towards her. Admittedly, they were not actually related, but I think his mum took her in when Victor was like, he was less than 10 years old. So they'd been raised as siblings, but I think they called each other cousin. But anyway, so he only has his brother in the film. And this kind of segues then into Jerry's story. When Jerry is first brought into the world, he is just kept underneath the mansion castle thing that Victor's living in. He's chained up underneath there while Victor tries to teach him things. Elizabeth and William is his brother's name, I think. I don't know. He's not important. I don't care about him. Elizabeth and William come to the house, and Elizabeth like wanders off and she finds Jerry essentially, and they form like quite a sweet little relationship. I can't really tell what kind of relationship they were supposed to have. Was it supposed to be romantic? It seemed like it might have been, but I'm not really sure. She feels bad for Jerry. She can tell he's been injured and she's not very happy with Victor about it. Again, in the book, he never meets her. He never meets... Or does he? Does he kill her? Is she who he kills? I should have reread it. In that context, he doesn't meet her, or at least we don't think he does, because Victor just abandons him and then runs off. So that's sort of like the first deviation. He has like a little introduction to a caring person, like right at the beginning, whereas in the book, he does not at all. He's just abandoned and left to like find his own way in the world, I guess. And this is where the real sort of deviation happens for the most part. No, I was about to say for the most part, Jerry's story is kept very similar. It's actually not. I lied. In the book, Jerry goes and ends up staying in like the outhouse of this cottage of a family who are from, I don't remember where. They may be Middle Eastern. I can't remember quite where they're from, but they're not English and they're not white. Basically learns how to talk. He learns how to communicate and share how he's feeling and all of his thoughts through just watching them and hearing their story. And we also actually get like then a whole almost like separate story within the book of their life and what's happened to them and how they've ended up there and sort of difficulties they're having, which I don't remember any of them off the top of my head. It's almost like we get a whole nother story in that. He kind of still does that in the film, but instead it's just like a random white family who hunt wolves. I'm in two minds about this, because on one hand I'm like, in a film I can understand you don't really have the time to then go through a whole nother storyline, because it is a full story in itself of what's happening to this family, so simplifying it the way that they did makes sense. Jerry in the film only really pays attention to the old man and then ends up talking to him quite a lot. In the book we sort of hear a lot more of the story. He sort of gets more involved in the whole family. He does still only talk to the old man because the old man's blind and can't see him. He does sort of form more of a connection with all of them, even though it's very one-sided. They don't know that. Whereas in the film it very much felt like it was just the old man. My main question is, why were they just a random white family? Why did we make them white? Like, why did that part have to change? I don't, especially for the time that it was, including that and sort of having just sort of like a genuine other story in that, and them being the sort of people that taught him and sort of showed him love. They didn't really show him love, but like they demonstrated love and sort of caring about people for the time it was written. Quite impressive that not to have been just some random middle-class white family. I'm just wondering why that was changed specifically. I get why their whole story couldn't be told, but I was a bit like, that's quite important to Jerry, and just, you know, for general representation. Why was that changed? The core of that is still the same. Jerry still goes and learns how to speak, and he learns how to care, and especially through this old man who he actually spends a lot more time with in the film than he does in the book, and he learns the importance of forgiveness and all of that. There is no scene where he's like chased from the town by angry villagers, like had rocks thrown at him. He's just shot multiple times. Oh, because something I forgot to mention, he just can't die in this film for some reason. He has like supernatural healing abilities. He's shot so many times. He nearly drowned. He's set on fire. He just can't die in this film, which is very different as well from the book. He's definitely a mortal man in the book. So I also questioned that a little bit. This did kind of lean more into the making him, yes, he very much more looks like a man than maybe what we see from like green, bolt-headed Frankenstein's monster, you know? He still, like, he roared like he was some mythical beast and he couldn't die, which I found odd, because everything else about how he looked and just like generally how he acted I actually quite liked. That I just felt was a bit of an odd choice to still make him this monster, this supernatural monster, even though he's quite clearly just a man. But still, all of that is very much the same. The key difference, I think, is sort of what happens after. In the book, how many times have I fucking said that? In the book, in the film, anyway. In the book, Jerry goes on to track down Victor and essentially ask him to create a companion, and Victor does start doing that. He starts getting the body parts again, he puts the woman all together, and then at the last minute he's like, no, I can't do this again, and he like destroys it. And that is when Jerry then is like, I can't remember if that's when he says the quote that's like, this is paraphrasing it, but the quote that's like, if you can't afford me love, then I will indulge in rage, or something. Is a great quote. That's not it, I'm shortening it significantly, but that's like his turning point, where he's like, you are not going to care about me, you're not going to look after me even though you created me, so I am going to ruin your life. And he kills many people. He basically sends Victor into a terror. Victor is very unwell. That is what then leads Victor to being like, enough's enough, I'm going to track him down and kill him. And that's how they end up in the Arctic on a ship. The direction the film went was, he goes to ask Victor to make him a companion. Victor doesn't even consider it. He's just like, no. Are you gonna have children? No, I can't unleash that on the world. Arsehole. Victor goes to shoot Jerry and Elizabeth jumps in front of him to save him. So she still ends up dying, but then Victor just blames it on Jerry and everyone is really angry at him. That is what leads to Victor deciding to pursue him, is the fact that Elizabeth gets shot, or he shot Elizabeth. And then the whole culmination is somewhat similar but slightly different. The book, Jerry finds Victor when Victor's already dead, I'm pretty sure, and then he is like, oh great, he's dead, and then goes off to kill himself because he's like, my deed is done, I've ruined his life. The film decided that Jerry was going to get to Victor while he was on his deathbed. Victor asks him for forgiveness and Jerry's like, yeah, I forgive you. I can never die. I just have to live this existence. But I forgive you. You die. We're all good men. Don't worry about it. And this is where I get annoyed again. This just very much feels too good, happy ending. Like, the whole point of it was supposed to be Jerry had learnt forgiveness from the old blind man and now he's demonstrating that forgiveness. But also, it just seems like this whole thing was, Victor had a sad childhood, Victor becomes his father, Victor on his deathbed feels bad about it, says sorry and is forgiven. I don't like that. I think that's just such a simplification of what is actually a very good story, looking at how man, and I don't specifically just mean men at this point, just mankind in general, is so greedy, fucks things up so bad, and then it's just like, I wonder why that happened, that can't possibly be my fault. Like, that's also me simplifying it, but I just don't like that oh, everything's absolved, it's fine because he said sorry, because no, Victor Frankenstein was fucking awful. Jerry should have never forgiven him, and Jerry would never have forgiven him, as in the book, he did not forgive him. I think there was a lot of decisions made to make it softer almost, or to make Victor seem slightly more likable, even though I will say it did a very good job of making me despise him still. Witnessing those scenes on screen is even more horrible than just like reading it, so it did still make me really dislike him, but I was just a little bit disappointed by the choices to have attempts at making him seem sympathetic. And I know good characters need to have dimension, they're not just going to be like, you know, one-sided, but when we're talking about an adaptation, that is what his character was like. There wasn't any dimension, he was just an obsessive twat. I don't think that we always need to go down the route of every villain, because Victor Frankenstein is the villain in this story. Not every villain needs to have like redemption or trauma or something to explain their evil actions. Like, they can just be messy, shitty humans, because that's what humans are. There doesn't need to be some sad reason for it that we then need to sympathize with, and I think that's what I found annoying. I will just quickly on the point of, this was just, I've just seen one person say this, so I don't know that this is a universal thing, but that original post on Threads that I saw about sort of the film making Jerry too sympathetic, that was the part I was like, I don't think I'm gonna agree with that, and I don't agree with that. And the reason I don't agree with that is because I found Jerry sympathetic in the book. I feel like you're supposed to, because he is just brought into this world against his will, treated awfully by a man who does not give a shit and will do nothing to help him or even, you know, say, yeah, sorry, I made a mistake. Just harmed by everyone who comes across him merely because of how he looks. Of course, there's sympathy for him. I feel like there's supposed to be, and I don't care what anyone says, Jerry's my angel. I love him. He can do no wrong. I did feel very sympathetic towards him in the film, but I wouldn't say I felt any more or less sympathetic towards him than I did in the book. I feel like they did his story decently. It was more Victor they ruined, and that doesn't really surprise me because there always needs to be something sad or understandable about an evil man in films like this. It can't just be that he was a twat.
I forgot to say, but I would also just like to add that I'm not a massive fan of the decision to end the movie with a quote from Lord Byron. I can't really find the words to explain why I dislike that, but I just don't.
Overall, with my thoughts on this, it is very much the fact that I do think this is a good film. I think visually it looked good. It had very stunning shots at times. The coffins in this were gorgeous and those shots were beautiful. I think it was a good film. It was engaging. My concentration is abysmal, and because I'm not really a film watcher, me sitting down and concentrating for like how long it was, 2.5 hours of a film, is a feat. So the fact that I did, there were a couple of times where I was like, how is there still an hour of this left? But for the most part, I was engaged, I was enjoying it, and although the story was different and there were still parts of me being like, that's not what happened, I was still getting into the, I suppose, new or reworked storyline. Unfortunately, there were also quite a few times where Victor was quite funny that really annoyed me, but I did appreciate the inclusion of some sort of humour in it, and specifically the style of his humour that was quite dry and a bit dark and sarcastic. I did really appreciate it. But do I think this is a good interpretation of the original classic? Yes and no. All of the points I mentioned, I think, are the main reasons why I don't think it's a good adaptation, mainly because it just changes Victor as a character and his story too much. And it might just be that I'm really biased because I fucking hate him. I personally just don't think it was necessary to try and add all of that sympathy and everything to him. On the other hand, I do think it still showed a good job of generally him being an awful character, even with the attempts at sympathy. I think it showed a good job of Jerry's story, and I think it was, for the most part, aside from changes that I can understand from a film point of view, mostly accurate enough to the story that I think it was decent. I will hold my hands up and say I've literally never seen any other Frankenstein film ever. The classic Frankenstein's monster of Hollywood does not appear to be something that I would enjoy, because I think it would be too different, especially where Jerry is my angel. With that being said, if there are any particularly good adaptations of it, let me know, because now that I've watched this, I am interested to start watching more adaptations of things. So even if it's not Frankenstein, if there are any really good book to film adaptations that you know of, that you love, that you've really enjoyed and you think did a really good job, equally let me know, because I might start watching more of them. That is all from me today though on the topic of Frankenstein and Jerry. Like I said, if you have seen it, I would love to know what you thought. I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.